All right, it's not a pleasant sight, but when you say the word blimp, this is what most people think of. Old pictures and disasters. If you remember the Hindenburg back in 1937, a fiery crash, as you can see. Despite what you think, though, there were 35 deaths when this crashed in New Jersey. Two-thirds of the passengers, despite that inferno you're looking at, actually survived, which is quite incredible. So often people don't think of blimps as something that are often reliable, but that has changed significantly over the years. Probably the second thing you think of when you see blimps is this. You think of sports stadiums, and you see the Goodyear blimp, of course, on top of these stadiums, and, of course, getting those pictures for you at games and those kinds of things. Now, blimps have come, I shouldn't say blimps, but airships, which are the next generation of blimps. And we'll have a guest who will explain what that is in a moment. But they're coming back into vogue for a few reasons. First, they give access to hard-to-reach places, which may not have roads. They can carry a lot of equipment. But take a look at this. And this is something that Canadians who live in, of course, northern Manitoba know very well. Winter road conditions are so terrible because of the thawing. You see these huge 18-wheelers essentially sinking, or they just can't simply get access to northern communities, mines, those kinds of things. So now people are asking, how do we find ways, instead of spending billions on making all-year roads?
Yeah, but you're looking at muskeg.
Yeah.
You know, hundreds of kilometres of it.
Exactly, to small populations. What other things can be considered? Well, we have a guest right now who has a great suggestion to those who want to look at a solution, and we are joined by Barry Prentice. He is with the Transport Institute at the Asper School of Business, and he joins us from Winnipeg. Thanks so much for joining us, Barry.
My pleasure.
Can you first just start off with basics here? We see pictures of the Hindenburg versus, you know, an airship today. What are basically the differences between the two?
Well, it's about as different as an old Dutch windmill and a modern wind turbine. Almost everything is different. The gas that's holding up the Hindenburg is hydrogen. Modern airships are using helium, which doesn't burn. The envelope material on the Hindenburg was just there for aerodynamics and to keep a bit of rain out. It had no structural strength. Today, most of the loads, or at least half the loads, are carried by the envelope itself. So huge advances in materials. And of course, the other thing that we would see is a lot of people on the ground holding ropes for the old airships. Today, with vectored engines and computerized systems, they land and take off by themselves. So everything is different.
We're seeing some pictures right now of some newer ones. These kind of are the more traditional shaped ones that we've seen. What are they being used for now?
Well, mostly they're being used for surveillance, as you mentioned in your intro, you know, photography over football fields. But a newer generation of larger airships and cargo airships is on the way. There's several companies that are looking at building airships in the 10 to 20 ton size and beyond that. And their express view is to use them for cargo purposes. And for the North is an ideal market. Well,
let's talk about the North and why. I mean, you are working with a group that is trying to advocate for getting these airships and using them up north. Tell me why it makes economic sense, first off.
Well, first of all, you don't have to have a lot of infrastructure. I mean, you do need a hangar somewhere for the airship to be maintained. But other than that, there's no infrastructure. You don't have to prepare the ground. So unlike a road, which you have to, as you said, it costs millions of dollars to build a road in the North, and you have to plow it and maintain it every year. With the airship, the vehicle is the infrastructure. So that's sort of the first thing. But the second is that they're very low on fuel. The lift is free, essentially, because it's a buoyant vehicle. You only provide the power to get through the air. So they burn less fuel, and that makes them less expensive than an airplane would be. And you can carry loads that are bigger than any truck would carry, ultimately. I mean, we're going to start with smaller ones, but ultimately we'll see very big airships in the skies.
What about helium? Is it expensive to produce?
Well, it's mined, essentially. It comes out of natural gas wells, and it has to be extracted. And it isn't inexpensive, but of course, you only fill the airship once, and then you have to top it up a little bit every time. It's more of a construction material. Think of it as being like the air in the tires of your car. You fill them up once, and you top it up every once in a while.
Give me a sense of, it's been talked about using this, for example, and I think you've got a business case for the Akati diamond mine, how it might make sense for them, or even like reaching northern communities, northern Aboriginal communities. Can you give me some numbers around this, why it makes sense? I mean, how many blimps are we talking about? How much does it cost versus how much does it cost to maintain a road year-round?
Well, those are all really good questions, and they're hard questions because it all depends on where the road is, the length of distance you're hauling, the amount of freight you're carrying at a given time. In our analysis, if you ignore the cost of building the winter road itself and just looked at the freight rates, an airship with 30-ton lift would compete with trucks over those winter roads. But the difference is the airship would provide year-round service. So instead of this disaster every spring where we don't get loads in or things don't come in and then a project's delayed a whole year, you have year-round service and you don't have to maintain those inventories.
But I bet a blimp costs a lot more than a truck, or excuse me, an airship costs more than a truck.
No question of that, but it's a lot less than an airplane. So it's a matter of what is the difference and what is the total cost? Because yes, it doesn't cost much for a truck, but if it costs you $1 million per kilometer to build a road, you have to add it onto the cost of the truck.
What about weather? I mean, are these things good in rough weather and high winds?
Well, there's some weather that they're not going to fly in, and just like in an airplane, won't fly in all weather, but they will fly 80 miles per hour. So, if it's an 80-mile-an-hour headwind, you're not going anywhere, but we don't see that very often. So the notion is that you could probably get at least 300 days of useful flying every year out of an airship.
That's not bad.
Much of this has to be tested. No, it's reasonable. They
How
actually like the cold weather.
Why? Sorry, Kim. Why? Because just there's better lift characteristics in the cold weather?
That's right. The air is thicker, and therefore you get more buoyancy. And it's also very stable air.
And Barry, where are we on this? In terms of when this could actually happen? I mean, which companies are making these airships? Is there funding available to start these up? I mean, what's the process to get this going, and how far along is it?
Well, we're amazingly close, and we're going to start seeing big airships in the skies before very long. A lot of this is coming out of the U.S. military. They need vehicles for persistent surveillance, and they've decided that airships are the vehicle that's going to work. There's a project in the U.S. called the LEMV, and they're acquiring an airship that'll be the size of a football field to fly at 20,000 feet and 25 days straight, bring it down close to Earth, and we carry 10 to 15 tons. There's several people in the bidding for this, but amongst the makers are Lockheed Martin and a British aerospace company called Hybrid Air Vehicles. There's also civilian airships underway. The Boeing Skyhook project is underway to build a hybrid airship helicopter vehicle that would lift 40 tons vertically and put them down. And then there's a number of other smaller companies building various types of airships. There's a lot of activity around the world.
One of the issues,
unfortunately, not much in Canada.
Well, and what's going to take what's it going to take to spur that on here in Canada?
Well, unfortunately, in Canada, I like to say that if we were bidding for the Airship Olympics, we wouldn't even be able to put a bid in because we have no hangars. You cannot build and operate airships without hangars, and that infrastructure has not been built here. Other places like U.S. and Europe built these during the First and Second World War, but Canada has no history of this, so we are kind of behind the eight ball.
Sorry to interrupt. We're showing a picture right now of a huge open pit in a mine, which is saying here that it could be a possible hangar. How would that work?
Well, I agree. We've talked about that, where you simply cover over a part of the open pit, and then it becomes a hangar because the airship can be forced down. They turn the engines vertically and just push the airship down and in. In fact, maybe ideal because part of the problem of an airship is crosswinds, getting it in the hangar. If you can come out inside the walls of the open pit mine, then you don't have that problem. So, and especially for very big airships, I think we will use them.
It's an incredible story,
Wow,
and
yeah.
we're so glad you came to tell us about it. Thanks so much.
Oh, my pleasure. You'll be hearing more, I guarantee you.
Well,
Thanks,
we do
Barry.
hope to, and we will report on when we do. That is Barry Prentice. He's with the Transport Institute with the Asper School of Business, University of Manitoba.
Amazing story, yeah. And especially if it makes it cheaper getting up north. A lot of communities in Ontario, even no fresh vegetables, no fresh fruit for the kids. Anything that helps that situation is good.
Yeah, no, it's got some huge applications. All right, stay with us. When we come back, the U.S. government is getting worried that China could create an OPEC-like cartel for rare earth. Is the world at China's mercy when it comes to these elements? That's up next.